Thursday, September 26th, 2024. It is an unexceptionally cool, slightly windy day in the city of Oakland. The Athletics are playing the Texas Rangers. This will be the final Major League game of baseball played in the Oakland Coliseum, and as far as we know, in the city of Oakland. The same venue that saw the rise of the infamous Mustache Gang, forever altering informal facial hair policies across the league. A dynasty in the early 70s headed by those mustachioed icons, such as Bert Campaneris, Sal Bando, Raleigh Fingers, Gene Tennis, and Reggie Jackson, who became the only non-Yankees team to pull off a three-peat. A Coliseum that saw feats of strength and fearlessness, such as the Man of Steel Ricky Henderson breaking Lou Brock's stolen base record, the Moneyball streak, the homer that saved the streak, the miracles of 2012 through 2014, led by a scrappy group of misfits such as Jed Lowry, Coco Crisp, and Sean Doolittle.
And that one is right at the knee, strike three called, and that's the ball game.
The concrete palace that believed in Stephen Vogt when no one else would, even 10 years after the fact.
I believe in Stephen Vogt! 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 I believe in Stephen Vogt!
A fan base that provides an energy unlike any other across the country. As a drummer, I've always been jealous of the Coliseum's de facto drumline headed by right field Will McNeil, a mainly working class bunch who show up to the stadium not for the needless bells and whistles that other teams feel obligated to use in order to persuade an otherwise disinterested crowd, but because of the sheer dedication they have for their team, the Oakland Athletics. So then, how did we arrive here?
Sports world this morning, and it hits Oakland hard. The Oakland A's inked a deal to buy an apparent 49-acre site. Plans to build a new ballpark near the Las Vegas Strip.
The Oakland Athletics are officially moving to Las Vegas this morning. MLB owners voted 30-0 to approve owner John Fisher's plan to relocate his franchise to Las Vegas.
As potentially the A's on the move out of the Bay.
Uprooted out of Oakland and into the void of Las Vegas, a city who sees the team more as an orphaned child that they just happen to run into instead of embracing them with open arms. A city who is so disinterested that construction of a new stadium hasn't even commenced by the start of this 56-year finale, forcing the A's to temporarily relocate 85 miles northeast to a minor league stadium in West Sacramento. Why are these fans being stripped of their team, making it the first time since 2005 a franchise has relocated? What went so wrong in the process to force this team to play in a minor league stadium for the foreseeable future? And who the hell is John Fisher, the man who was credited as being the architect of this disaster? Well, let's first dive into that last question. John Joseph Fisher was born on June 1st, 1961, to Don and Doris Fisher, who founded the clothing bin superbrand The Gap 8 years later in 1969. Interestingly enough, The Gap's first vendor was Levi Strauss, owned by Walter Haas Jr., who would go on to own the Athletics and oversaw the franchise during their most prosperous era from 1980 to 1995. Now, typically I would commend the industrial spirit of the elder Fisher, but it should be noted his wife Doris came from money herself, minimizing the risk of their investment. Growing up, John Fisher was known by his family as Harpo, referring to the fact that when he really wanted something, he would harp on it until his wish was granted. Basically, think Veruca Salt from Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, but it's a Northern Californian kid with early onset baldness. As a rich young socialite, or brat, as I think most of us refer to them as, John's parents sent their kids to the prestigious Phillips Exeter Academy, a private school in New Hampshire, which prepped John for Princeton University, where he studied politics. After graduation, he was backdoored into the Republican National Committee, where he was employed by both President Ronald Reagan and then Vice President George H.W. Bush. His greatest asset while serving his role was his name. Continuing on with his skill for harping, he would name drop his own father in order to get what he wanted, mainly when it came to raising money for his political employers. He used this tactic for California Senate candidate Ed Zhao. Zhao? Look, y'all know I struggle with pronunciation, let's just go with Zhao. Unfortunately, Fisher's tactics did not work as Zhao lost in the 1986 election, so the salesman retreated back to school, this time at the closer to his home Stanford. After getting his master's, John took a role for a real estate firm whose main client was Daddy's company, The Gap. That real estate company failed, so Father Don extended an olive branch to his son and let him take over their investment firm Pisces Inc. in 1992. Let me interrupt here for a second. At this point, John Fisher is 31 years old, and as far as we know, because information on him is very limited, his accomplishments are nepoing his way into the RNC, using nepo powers to raise funds for an ultimately failed Senate campaign, and unearthing the raw strength of nepotism, the likes we've never seen before, to get a job with a real estate company that went up in flames as soon as he came on board. And for all of his troubles, he was put in charge of managing an investment firm likely worth billions of dollars. Look, I'm not one to talk. I'm 27 years old, and my greatest accomplishment was getting out of bed this morning. But I need to emphasize we're talking about a man who, despite receiving top-tier education, still felt the need to name-drop daddy in order to get what he wanted. Even then, every avenue he was given has gone up in flames. Yet, he kept getting more powerful positions, basically failing upward. John Fisher is someone who never had to face the real consequences for his ineptitude the same way about 99% of us do. John's first foray into creating something himself occurred in 1998 when he used his family funds to step into the logging industry, specifically logging the redwood trees of Northern California, the African elephant of forestry, when he bought 350 square miles of land in Mendocino County. This sparked protest among environmental activists, with Gap stores even being vandalized. Fisher, looking once and for all to stake his claim as a competent businessman not under the shadows of his parents' net of success, used his family money to buy a majority stake in the Oakland Athletics alongside business partner Lewis Wolf in 2005. And with that, I would like to welcome my guest who will be watching the game with me, John Fisher.
Thank you for having me.
Now, John, as I understand, this is your first time watching an Oakland Athletics game in, just like ever.
Well, you know, the Giants are always on when the A's are playing.
But what about when they're playing each other?
No comment.
I mean, you couldn't even be there for the final game?
The game was at 12:37. I had a shareholder meeting. It's hard to move those around.
Can you name a single player on your team? Just give me a name.
Barry Bonds.
God, it is, as expected for such a monumental occasion, a sold-out crowd, something that the Coliseum hasn't seen since the 2019 wildcard game, and the largest crowd since the reverse boycotts took place a year prior. Over the years, the stadium has fallen into a state of advanced dilapidation, a building with a rich history, treated with the same care as an abandoned prison, one that scared away crowds in record numbers over the years. It doesn't help that the team was sold off in spades during the critical hours of negotiations for a new stadium while season ticket prices rose, but we'll get to that later. There is a notable resignation inside the Coliseum. The energy is still there, but it's the same energy you'd get from a funeral after party. Nothing in life preps you as a fan losing your team. Some in the crowd are mentally blocking the reality of the situation. Others are clearly trying to embrace every moment, trying to take in and appreciate the little incongruities that made this stadium and team special, ones many of us would take for granted if it was our team. Former A's starting pitcher Barry Zito, once part of Oakland's Big Three, performs the national anthem. In a year where most MLB fans are still recovering from Ingrid Andreas's, interpretation of the anthem before the home run derby, Zito's is perfectly imperfect.
And the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air.
He's clearly having trouble with the feedback he's getting in his in-ears, and while his music is actually kind of fire,
I only think of you on days that end in Y.
He's not a classically trained singer, but his rendition of the anthem was, as Dallas Braden put it, everything it needed to be. Speaking of, announcing the game is Dallas Braden, a former Major League pitcher who grew up around the Bay Area. He himself was at the center of another great Coliseum moment when he pitched a perfect game for the Athletics on May 9th, 2010. Which fell on Mother's Day that year after he lost his own mother to cancer while Braden was a senior in high school. A human encyclopedia of athletics baseball and the Coliseum itself, helpfully indexing every entry with an affectionate nickname given to every player, concession worker, you name it.
6-4-3. You know they roll them up tight here in the Bay, Z.
Huey Lewis. More than just the game.
How about you, E? I see you working with the tie. Played with a fellow by the name of Never Say No Breslow.
Co-piloting with him is Jenny Kavnar, a newcomer to the Athletics broadcast booth, being the first woman play-by-play announcer in MLB history. Some of her calls received criticism earlier in the season for being...
Hey Siri, it's not your night. A feeling Mason Miller might have some... 0-1, and that's launched towards left field, and the payback comes at the bat of Jose Siri.
Not great. All I have to say to that is, if you were among the crowd who participated in complaining about and making fun of someone who doesn't even broadcast for your team, then you have too much time on your hands and should use that extra time to do something more productive with your life. Befitting of the moment, the first batter in the final game at the Coliseum is none other than Marcus Semien. Semien, just like Dallas Braden, was a product of the Bay Area. He was a star athlete and two-way player who was taken by the White Sox in the 6th round of the 2011 MLB draft. He came through their system as a Swiss Army infielder who was unfortunately plagued by injury issues in the early going of his professional career. Semien was part of the return package for Indiana sports legend Jeff Samardzija. Despite having only 40 innings at the 6th to his name in the majors, the Athletics named him their starting shortstop in 2015, where he was bad by every stretch of the imagination. Despite this, the Athletics gave him some rope there, bringing in recently unemployed coach Ron Washington to shape Semien's game at the position. Washington's mentorship, Semien's determination, and Oakland's belief in him transformed the floundering shortstop into one of the best in the game. A key piece of the core that helped lead Oakland to their next, and at this point, final run of postseason berths. Despite this, when his rookie contract expired at the end of the 2020 season, John Fisher lowballed him. He offered Semien a one-year contract that would be worth less than what he would have made in 2020, with $10 million of that being offset in deferred payments of $1 million per year over the course of 10 years. Semien obviously declined and would go on to sign an $18 million deal to play second base for the Blue Jays, before signing a mega contract with the Rangers, becoming a top 10 player over the next 3 years, finishing third in MVP voting twice, and winning a World Series with these Rangers in 2023. Say, John, you were really on a streak back there in 2020, weren't you? Not only did you turn your back on a hometown kid who was budding into a superstar under the direction of your miracle working front office, you furloughed a bunch of those same employees during the pandemic. You also refused to pay minor leaguers during the layoff, and only reversed your decision when faced with public backlash. What did you need all that money for anyway, John?
I was saving it for political donations.
Of course you were. Like last year, when you were donating to 2020 election deniers and Kirsten Sinema for some reason. You know, it's funny when people call you cheap, because looking through your political donations, you really are not afraid to splurge.
It's all a part of the business.
Okay, John. Now Marcus Semien stands as a sympathetic opponent to these fans as they begin the Let's Go Oakland chants for the final time, having a first-hand account of all the corner cutting, shareholder appeasing, and betrayal that led to the significance of this at-bat. Semien pops out to first on the third pitch he sees. Ace pitcher JT Ginn rolls through the first 3 innings, using his sinker to get 5 on it, 5 groundouts, including a key double play in the top of the third. Rangers pitcher Kumar Rocker matches Ginn's zeros through the first 2 innings. There are 4 ace position players who I want to shine a light on during this game, and conveniently, all of them play a role in the 3rd inning. First off, we have their current #1 prospect Jacob Wilson, son of former Major League shortstop Jack Wilson, who also delivered the final walk-off in Oakland A's history 2 nights ago. Off the bat, I predict that Jacob Wilson will become what everyone wanted Luis Ariz to be, a high-grade contact hitter who can handle his own at a premium position while not being a drag on the base paths. Also, just look at how active his batting stance is. I mean, come on. How can you not love that bat wiggle? Jose Martinez would be proud. Wilson uses his transcendent in the making contact ability to scoop up a fairly well-placed sinker and uses all of his moderate speed to force a bad throw from the inexperienced third baseman Jonathan Ornelas to reach first on an infield single. Next up, we have one of my personal favorite players, Lawrence Butler, a product out of Atlanta who competed alongside current major leaguers such as Michael Harris II and Tosh Bradley. Law was drafted by the A's in the 6th round out of Westlake High School, not the one you're thinking of, in 2018. Despite his crazy athletic build and quick hands at the plate, Butler was given a modest major league prospect status throughout his time in the minors, as his propensity to swing and miss often, as well as concerns about his defense, had evaluators skeptical. MLB peaked him as the A's number 11 prospect in 2023, as Fangraphs pegged him at number 4. After a brief exposure that year, the Athletics penciled him in as their opening day right fielder in 2024. His April was dreadful, but for those who are willing to look past the numbers on the board and dig deep below to my favorite place, under the hood, you'd see there was a lot to like about Butler's game. It is true, his K rate was high. He was hitting way too many balls on the ground, but when he made airborne contact, it was loud like a jet engine. Unfortunately, as players on teams who can't afford world-class coaching do, they let results affect process, and that's what happened to Butler in May, which led to a demotion to Las Vegas in the middle of the month. Did this discourage the indomitable Butler? Fuck no. Even though he middled in the high offensive PCL environment, the Athletics, who have the organizational depth of a frying pan, brought Law back up on June 18th, and all he did for the rest of the year was ball the fuck out.
Sandwich that with something. That ball in the air towards right field. Lawrence Butler is going to watch it fly at Fenway. Fence, and for Lawrence Butler now trying to get the hit party started. That lands in fair territory. Lawrence Butler will head towards second, and he's going all the way to third as it was hanging out.
This one's crushed to deep right center field. On the run, Robert. He's going to run out of room.
He's been their calling card. Is he going to make it 3? Is he going to make it 3? Lawrence Butler's second deck. He has announced himself with authority today.
They might have to rename it to Zone 3. Well, that one almost put another crack in the Liberty Bell.
Tagging up. The catch made, and here comes the throw home from Lawrence Butler. Shayla Williams makes the tag, and another double play. But the outfielders get in on the action. Lawrence Butler out towards center field. This ball is cooking, and this ball's out of here. Lawrence Butler, stay hot.
In his own words, Lawrence made the adjustment of trusting his fast hands more and being able to turn like a dime on inside fastballs, owning the third quadrant against them down the stretch.
It was really just more of like trying to stay in on them. The majority of it was me really just, keeping that front side closed and just trusting that. I mean, if it's inside, I got quick enough hands to be able to get to it, and keeping it like through the middle of the field and instead of trying to just hook it down the line.
Butler put his fast hands on display to deposit a slider leaking through the third quadrant into center field. Next up, we have the man who has become the de facto face and elder statesman of this core, Brent Rooker. Brent had the track record of a legitimate slugger out of college when he took home the National Player of the Year award from the Collegiate Baseball newspaper in 2017, an award that has been bestowed upon greats such as Todd Helton, Chris Bryant, and even his future manager Mark Kotsay. He was drafted by the Twins in 2017, but unfortunately for him, the team had become saturated with corner outfield talent with the emergence of Eddie Rosario and Max Kepler. Brent was one of the many unfortunate souls who made his major league debut to a stadium full of cardboard in 2020. Still, he put up a good week and was on the Twins opening day roster in 2021, but he got just 3 hits and 30 plate appearances and found his bags continually packed between the majors and minors across 3 different organizations from 2021 to 2022. Still, Rooker kept fighting what had now become an upward battle, and after getting selected off of waivers by the lowly Athletics a week before Thanksgiving in 2022, an opportunity presented itself for Rooker to be virtually guaranteed extended playing time in the majors for the first time in his career. Rooker would go on to have one of the best Aprils that year, barely losing to former A Matt Chapman for Player of the Month honors on his way to getting named as an All-Star reserve, and one of the only reasons to watch the team in 2023. He comes out and polishes every aspect of his hitting game in 2024, and despite not being named an All-Star, he is having a season that is going to secure some MVP votes. He's also making a presence for himself on social media, not being afraid to discuss the more metaphysical aspects of the game, showing his dynamism at the plate, Rooker pulls a 2-strike slider on Butler's quadrant. A decent pitch by all accounts for a seeing-eye single to load the bases. After a run-scoring force-out from J.J. Bleday, one that would have scored more had Marcus Semien not gone all out to keep the ball on the infield, showcasing his prowess that these fans used to cheer for. Catcher Shea Langoliers steps up to the plate. Shea Langoliers is by all accounts a strange player. His blocking was the worst for all catchers in 2024. His caught stealing percentage was among the best. His framing sucks, but he's kind of fast for a catcher. He's a paradox, and that's why I love him. After getting drafted in the first round by the Braves in 2019, he was one of the centerpieces in the Matt Olson trade, the one that really signaled the end of the last true core in Oakland, a trade that many criticized the Athletics over for not getting a stronger return package. But here is Shea Langoliers in 2024 at 26 years old, showing the makings of a foundational player. Before the game, he was presented with the Catfish Hunter Award, an award given out every season since 2004 to the A's player that best exemplifies, and I quote, the courageous, competitive, and inspirational spirit demonstrated by the late Hall of Famer Catfish Hunter. He will be the last player, as far as we know, who will be presented with this award in Oakland. Langoliers lofts another rocker slider into left field to score Butler for a sac fly. Small ball is alive and well, thus ending the first frame of the last game in the Oakland Coliseum. So what did go so terribly wrong to bring us to this point? Relocations don't happen very often. In fact, only 5 other teams, including the Athletics franchise, have relocated since 1960, and one of those teams was the Seattle Pilots, and the average lifespan for these relationships between team and city was 14 years. This is unprecedented territory for a team and a city with this much history to forcibly separate, the likes we have not seen since the Giants and Dodgers packed their bags for the West Coast over 60 years ago. Hey, Cole here. I hope y'all are enjoying the video and are excited / slightly petrified to find out what led to this catastrophe. But before we continue, I have an important announcement. And don't skip this one. Trust me, I know all the tricks. I know about the 10-second double tap rule. You're not going to get away with it this time. I have officially launched the No More Fielders Patreon. This is something when I started the channel I knew was going to... Dude, did you really skip? I told you not. Go back. No, go back. Go back. Anyway, this is something that when I launched the channel, I knew was going to happen eventually. It was just a matter of when. In it, you will see 3 membership tiers. The first tier, level 1 ball enjoyer, will get you a ton of perks. We're talking exclusive content, including my annual replacing recap series, tier list, and some other ideas I have. In fact, if you go on my Patreon right now, you will see the first episode of Reference Rundown, which will be a Patreon exclusive series. So go check it out. The ability to vote on videos, including what I do next for the replacing series, which I will strictly adhere to. Access to exclusive posts such as behind the scenes, updates, and even the occasional article that I write. And your name will appear at the end of every one of my videos. All of this can be yours for $3 a month. Think about that for a second. That's $36 a year. That's how much some of us spend on a single Uber Eats order. And trust me, it will go a long way. The level 2 ball knower will give you all of those benefits, plus access to my asset library. As you know, I create an extensive amount of assets for all these videos. And now I will be releasing them to the public for $5 a month. This includes charts. I know a lot of y'all really mess with the 1910 batting title race chart. Now that's available. Workbooks. I know a ton of people were curious about where a certain player ranked on the Juice Ball Frauds list. Well, that is available. Plus, I will send you a sticker and you will be given a super shout out at the end of every video. And for a limited time, the first 26 people to sign up for this tier, I will also send you an Oakland Athletics baseball card. So we got Dave Stewart here, we got Yonder Alonso, Terry Steinbeck, we got Dennis Eckersley, Jose Canseco, Kirk Dressendorfer. One of these cards can be yours if you sign up. There is one final tier, but it goes a little bit deeper than the other 2, so I just recommend going to my Patreon and checking out either my introductory video or just looking at the tier itself to find out more information. So if you love and want to support what I do, please consider checking out my Patreon. Link is in the description. Now back to the video. The story of this tenuous and painful separation begins and ends with the Coliseum, and the many attempts for the Athletics to move out of it dating back to the 1990s. So John, Even though you are the poster child for this catastrophe, you were definitely not the only man who should be blamed for it. You just happened to be holding the ball when it finally dropped. And I think it's important for people outside of Oakland to understand that fact.
Thank you. No more fielders.
This doesn't absolve you of anything, but context is due.
It's a ground ball to the right side, speared by Phillips, flips to Eckersley, yes!
After a successful ownership that oversaw 5 playoff appearances, 3 AL pennants, and a World Series title amongst record attendance numbers for the franchise, Walter Haas Jr. sold the team to real estate developers Stephen Schott and Ken Hoffman in 1995. The two immediately put the future of the franchise sticking to Oakland in doubt, and ran what had been a top 10 payroll into the ground in subsequent years, alienating players both through their words and actions. According to the source Baseball Oakland, who's been a really good source for this section of the video, by the way, you can go back as far as 1998 for instances of the Athletics exploring the possibility of moving to Las Vegas. In 1999, a new ownership group headed by Save Mart CEO Robert Piccinini, which included a stake from former A's great Reggie Jackson, put a bid in for the team. This group made a verbal yet non-binding promise to keep baseball in Oakland. However, then Commissioner Bud Selig tabled the deal with the hopes of whittling down the potential ownership group through death by 1,000 paper cuts, which turned out to be a success for him. While a lease was signed to keep the Athletics at the Coliseum until 2004, the clock had officially begun to find the Athletics a new home, and from the start, it was in the hands of people who thought the move to Oakland was a mistake in the first place. Just take it from Bud Selig himself.
32 years ago, the Kansas City A's moved to Oakland. They hurt the Giants badly. They never really did very well themselves. It was a horrible mistake. As an old history major, I'm not likely to repeat mistakes in the past.
Now, I'm not sitting here saying that I agree with this stance. In fact, I vehemently disagree with it. The city of Oakland has shown an undying loyalty to their team, and even though it can't be measured, I'd be willing to bet they're in the top 10 for loyalty they've shown, despite all the scapegoating and below-the-belt punches they've received over the years.
I've never said a bad word about the fans in Oakland.
You don't say anything, John. You hide behind the brand that you've done everything in your power to tarnish. Plus, you don't need to do any of the talking. You already let Lou Wolf do it for you. Yes, while Bud Selig was apprehensive about all the ownership changes in 1999, enough to block a feasible deal that would have given lifetime security for baseball in Oakland, as far as we know, it only took 6 years for him to throw those concerns out the window when his college roommate Lou Wolf headed a new ownership bid, this time successful in 2005. Even though Lou Wolf was named the official owner, it was John Fisher who funded the power grab. The next 10 years would be plagued with several failed attempts to wrestle the A's out of the heart of Oakland. First stop was Fremont in 2006, known as the suburbs of Silicon Valley. Lou Wolf bought land 20 miles south of the Coliseum from Cisco in 2007, with plans to build a $1.8 billion ballpark village surrounding a 32,000 capacity stadium. The renderings of the stadium looked decent enough, but with the move down the road came a very ugly name change. Ugh. Apparently, Fremont citizens hated the move more than even the most diehard Oaklandites because, well, the city's infrastructure couldn't handle a major sports team crashing into their small community, and the plans were scrapped in 2009. How real estate developer Lou Wolf thought he could shove a Major League Baseball team into a town with a current population of 230,000 without any drastic infrastructural upgrades, we will never know, but the trip to Fremont was officially over. Next stop, San Jose. Only problem, the San Francisco Giants have exclusive rights to the territory. Something the Athletics knew going into this, but Lou Wolf presumably thought his buddy Selig would step in and throw him a bone over. He did not. The city of San Jose, actually wanting the A's this time, took their fight to the Supreme Court, using antitrust rules that MLB has been exempt from since 1922 as their base argument to try and throttle control of the area over the Athletics. The Supreme Court did not budge. This was such a catastrophic failure that Lou Wolf decided enough was enough and that he'd rather spend his elder years tending to his grandchildren than shopping his team to cities that either don't want it or are legally unable to have it. By this point, the Coliseum is in complete shambles. Dugout bathrooms are overflowing. Concourse ceilings are leaking, and John Fisher had made it clear he has no intention to renovate what he saw as a concrete hellscape. He wanted to build something new, but remember the last time he tried to do that? With the current lease agreement set to expire at the end of 2024, this is where we arrive at our final stop, and our final two players. First, let us reintroduce John Fisher.
My mommy makes all my decisions for me, and I use money that I didn't earn to get politicians to like me.
And new president of baseball operations, Dave Kaval, who, the more I think about it, is the Mr. Beast of baseball presidents, always wanting to go bigger and better, but has the self-awareness of a goldfish and the integrity of single plywood. However, his presence provided hope. Someone who had helped build a new stadium before, which at this point we cannot take for granted. The final stop? Howard Terminal, this time a mile away from the heart of downtown Oakland, near Jack London Square. Now, this area was identified by the city as a potential site for a new ballpark as far back as 2009, even though Lou Wolf said it had no ability to be implemented for one. But in 2018, it was officially identified by his operational replacement, Dave Kaval, as the site that would keep the A's in Oakland. Disclaimer, a lot of what I'm discussing is a gross oversimplification of events. Even leading up to Howard Terminal, I left off a few other stadium proposals, all of which share a theme of being doomed from the start. I remember I was blown away when I first saw the Howard Terminal renderings in 2018. It had this neo-futurist twinge to it, between the V-shaped hotels that flanked its entrance and the greenery that shaded its perimeter. The location had logistical problems, sure, but every one of them seemed to be hand-waved away by some outlandish solution equated by the outlandishness of the stadium design itself. The nearest BART station is over a mile away. No worries, we'll just shuttle fans in via a gondola. There's a nearby factory that will generate a ton of noise. No worries, we'll just build a fucking wall. Oh, and also we expect this to be ready by opening day 2023. Now, I make it no secret that I'm kind of a dumbass. So the way I'm able to make sense of such a complex process that involves political, architectural, and infrastructural nuances for building an MLB stadium is by comparing it to a school group project. Think of MLB as the teacher. At the end of the day, it's their league, and they have an antitrust exemption that gives them power over our very own government. The Athletics are the kid who can kind of do whatever the fuck they want because they have an in with the teacher and are going to pass the class regardless, unless they just don't turn anything in. The city of Oakland is the student who's going to fail if the project doesn't get a passing grade. And the Oakland fans are basically the group member who's told to shut up and also that they're not doing enough every time they try to speak up. Despite both John Fisher and Dave Kaval claiming that the Coliseum site itself is not viable for a new ballpark, they buy half the land from Alameda County for a discounted price. Why? Well, in my opinion, to gather more leverage. It's another really good way to make heads or tails out of every single one of their decisions. If the city of Oakland doesn't want to play ball for Howard Terminal, then the Athletics can just keep them from recouping the Coliseum land without their agreement. Despite this gut punch, the city of Oakland continues to play along. After all, by this point they have already lost both the Raiders and Warriors. It would be devastating to lose all three major sports teams in the span of 10 years. Everything is going relative to plan. A few lawsuits here and there, but that is always going to be expected for such a massive project. But COVID hits in 2020, which grinds progress to a halt. The teacher, Major League Baseball, is getting a bit nervous that their students' group project won't be done by the end of the semester, the end of the current lease agreement in 2024. They give the A's permission to start exploring potential cities outside of Oakland in May of 2021. And if they don't reach a concrete decision by January of 2024, they will lose revenue sharing. Money from the league that they get for being poor that should be used to invest in the team, but John Fisher has always used to line his pockets, beginning the arc of, as Dave Kaval puts it, the parallel paths. Now just remember, the Athletic strategy up to this point was to gather as much leverage as they possibly could in order to strong-arm the best possible deal they could from the city of Oakland to make their outlandish dreams come true. MLB basically gave them a golden ticket, as now John Fisher and Dave Kaval have the ability to take their ball and go fuck off somewhere else, such as Las Vegas. This is how, for example, when the city of Oakland passed and agreed to a very reasonable term sheet, the A's could go, not to our liking. Remember all those fantastical solutions to very logistically binding problems brought up a few minutes ago? Well, the A's basically expected the city of Oakland to subsidize every single one of them. They'd fund the ballpark themselves, sure, but everything else? Well, if Oakland really wanted to keep their team, they had to pay up. Which, to be fair, is a standard practice for funding new stadium projects, which is a whole nother can of worms, which we can't even get into. It is also around this time when the great sell-off commences. First, the aforementioned trade of star first baseman Matt Olson, then Matt Chapman, Sean Manaea, Frankie Montas, Sean Murphy. Basically, every player worth their weight in salt was shipped off for spare parts. Fans very frustrated with seeing what had been a playoff-winning core as recently as 2020 being stripped away one by one while season ticket prices began to spike, stopped showing up to games. And silently, the Athletics used this to justify why the city of Oakland wasn't viable in the long term for a baseball team. All of this came to a head on April 19th, 2023, when it was announced, that the Athletics bought land just off the Vegas Strip, a parcel they apparently spent the last 2 years scouting. Oakland Mayor Sheng Thao, realizing that all the progress made in the last 2 years was just a ruse to, in her words, extract a better deal out of Las Vegas, ceased all negotiations. Howard Terminal was officially dead. MLB owners unanimously approved the relocation on November 16th, and Rob Manfred even waived the $300 million relocation fee. Fisher himself was asked about this curious exemption he got and how he was able to receive it, and let's just say old Harpo did what he's best at. Now, with the situation handled so incompetently, a window of hope was created. Like, a circumstance could occur where they botch this so badly, the Athletics are thrust back into Oakland. For example, not even a month later after buying land off the Strip, they pivot to the site of the former Tropicana Hotel, this time on the Strip, where the fact that by the time this very game commenced, not one shovel has hit dirt on either site, let alone have the full term sheets been passed to give us an idea of what financing this project would even look like. The story of the Athletics' forceful removal out of Oakland was the story of a lot of things, but it ended with two men. One who had never once in his life suffered the consequences of his failures, and the other with delusions of such grandeur that he forgot where his machinations ended and reality began. They won't suffer for this. John Fisher is still worth billions of dollars. His franchise's evaluation is still rising despite crying poor. Dave Kaval will be able to look at the Vegas Stadium, if it ever sees through, and crown it as a legacy-defining success. Because no idea is ever too ambitious for Dave. They'll sit in their executive suites, sip their overpriced drinks from their metal straws, and look over at a sea of tourists flooding their stadium, rooting for their guys to crush the lowly Athletics. Not an LVA hat in the building. And they'll see the vapid strip that their shitty ballpark sits on, and they'll look at each other in the eye and say, "We did it." But anyway, we have a ball game to finish. JT Ginn retires the next 6 in order. So I don't know if y'all believe in karmic magic, or you just chalk everything up to us humans trying to piece together the chaos of our universe by finding patterns in a never-ending chasm of quarks and atoms bouncing off each other ad infinitum. Whatever you choose to believe in was at play in the bottom of the 5th. Future batting title winner Jacob Wilson gets on and takes advantage of a bobble to reach second. 3 batters later, JJ Bleday hits what looks like a routine fly before Wyatt Langford loses the ball in the Oakland Sun. Almost 12 years to the day, Rangers outfielder Josh Hamilton loses the ball in that same Sun, which ended up being the difference maker in a pretty important game. Somewhere, Ray Fosse looks down and smiles. A half inning later, Texas gets on the board after JT Ginn runs into some trouble, forcing him out of the game. Now with a narrow lead, it is a march through the bullpen, and to the one they call the Slim Reaper. Our first trooper is the veteran TJ McFarland. There is something to be said about the diminished role of the loogie in today's game. But what about the Gibbidigow pal, or the guy you bring in to get a double play against a lefty? McFarland is among the best in doing this. He doesn't really do anything else well, but when there's a runner on first and a lefty up, you know who to call. He almost works his magic against Nathaniel Lowe.
On the ground, Geloff to Wilson onto first, and a double play. TJ does it again.
But the powers of MLB conspired against the Oakland A's yet again, narrowing their margin to 1 run. And now, just like in 2012, the drop ball in the outfield is the difference maker coming out of the inning. The Athletics and Rangers are both put down in order following 2 half innings, but every great game needs a great play, and we were given one in the top of the 7th.
This one is center field. J.J. Bleday on the move, a diving catch! J.J. Bleday with a diving catch!
This is where we get to the final 7th inning stretch in the history of Oakland sports, as far as we know. This is the point when it seems to really hit the crowd. This is it, folks. 4 more half innings, and after that, no more Oakland baseball. No more drums and right. No more chants for the backup catcher. No more victory celebrations. No more fielders to cheer on. All the history inside this concrete donut. A city so passionate that they're willing to endure and even embrace a stadium that's been whittled down to its struts. Does this mean anything to you, John?
1 million, 2 million, 3 million what?
Do you even know what makes the city of Oakland and its baseball team so special in the first place?
No. 4 million, 5 million.
During the California gold rush of the 1850s, Oakland became a viable alternative to the city of San Francisco as rents in the ever-growing town became too much for newcomers, so they set their sights east-ish. Because of this, Oakland has always been seen as the younger and less salient community, thus grew the underdog mentality that the city is known for. In the 50s, as westward expansion was at its apex in the sports world, Oakland was yet again looked over in favor of its brother on the other side of the bay. In response, proud Oaklandite and real estate developer Robert Nahas headed a nonprofit to raise funds for a multi-purpose stadium that could attract teams from multiple leagues. If he built it, they would come. After the construction of the stadium, he transferred the ownership of it over to Alameda County and the city of Oakland. This was a stadium built by the city for the city. While their neighbors to the west got a team before a new stadium, they had to build a new stadium without the promise of a new team. The plan worked as both the expansion football team Raiders as well as MLB's Kansas City Athletics found homes there. Oakland Alameda County Coliseum was among the crop of venues known as cookie-cutter stadiums, multi-purpose facilities built in the cheap lands outside their respective cities that favored maximizing capacity over curating a healthy fan experience. They're gaudy, a relic of a post-World War II America that wanted to abandon their cities for the last green pasture that they could turn into a gray glob of concrete. Most teams started phasing these stadiums out in the mid-90s the same way teams that played in jewel boxes faded those out in favor of those same cookie cutters. But Oakland Alameda withstood. In fact, they doubled down when they added Mount Davis in 1996 to lure their Raiders back from Los Angeles, making it resemble a classic cookie cutter even more. While the jewel boxes that withstood, such as Wrigley and Fenway, are treated like historical artifacts, the Coliseum is treated like a historical canker sore, a past that just isn't worthy of historical restoration. But Oakland sports fans continue to embrace it year after year. It was their mecca, a second home to many, an underdog facility for a city of underdogs. And now it's time as a major league facility is coming to a close. The 7th inning stretch seemed to reinvigorate and galvanize this crowd. The sell the team chants that were murmured throughout the game have grown more intense and more unified. Even though the game was anticipated to have an especially rowdy crowd, with security even being substantially increased for it, as said before, the mood of the fans had been a quiet resignation. But with the end near, fans start to make their feelings really known.
Looks like we have a bit of an issue. Right field looks like a smoke bomb.
Now we can discuss the merits of throwing smoke bombs on the field in protest all we want. Personally, I wouldn't advocate for it, but most of us haven't experienced this type of grief. Now, we've all lost loved ones. I'm not saying this is the most intense grief one can experience, but this is one of the more unique types of grief. So let's hold our judgment for better days. When you know the end is near, you start counting finals. The final home run, final strikeout, final walk-off, final loss, final triple, final double play, final pinch hitter. But the Oakland Coliseum has a final unique to it. You see, with gaudy multi-purpose stadiums comes even gaudier field dimensions. To fit a football field on a baseball diamond requires extending the foul territory out to absurd lengths. Because of this, there is a vast field of open grass and foul territory, and in the bottom of the 7th, we saw the final catch in an area of the field that is occupied by fans in 29 of the other 30 stadiums. Our next guardian angel to get us to the Reaper is Michael Otanez, a 26-year-old reliever who averages 98 miles per hour on his fastball and found a way to strike out nearly 55% of batters he faced during his 2023 in the minors while pitching to the tune of a 6.08 ERA. Yes, folks, we have ourselves a wild type thing. Keep your arms and legs inside the cart at all times. Unfortunately, this ride has to shut down early, as it turns out the cracked main bearings is still cracked. Finally, however, we arrive at the Reaper. In a long and storied history of Oakland closers, from the Mustache Gang charter member Raleigh Fingers to the Hall of Famer Dennis Eckersley, the reliable Houston Street, and Grant Balfour's Rage, the city is blessed with one last glimpse at a great closer, Mason Miller. Miller throws gas. To show you how much gas he threw in 2024, the league as a whole threw 3,321 pitches over 100 miles per hour. Mason threw over 15% of those pitches. That may not seem like a lot, but compare that percentage to Rickey Henderson's 130 stolen bases for the A's in 1982. That accounted for 4% of the league's stolen base total, the same percentage of the league's 1927 home run total that belonged to Babe Ruth. That is my threshold for when an individual player starts to break the entire league. Mason Miller more than tripled that threshold. And now, if all goes according to plan, he'll throw the last pitch as an Oakland A, a helping of gas before the stadium metaphorically burns to the ground. By the way, did you know Mason Miller's walkout song is Burn It to the Ground by Nickelback? How poetic. Langalier's arm isn't quite enough to get Langford stealing. It doesn't matter. One pitch later, Miller gets Garcia to ground out to him on a 102 mile per hour fastball. Now we arrive at presumably the final bottom inning in Oakland Athletics history. Former top prospect Tyler Soderstrom is the final walk, Geloff the final sacrifice, and Seth Brown, owner of the final homer in the Coliseum, is also the owner of the final hit. The last Oakland hitter in America's Last Dive Bar is future batting title champion Jacob Wilson. And now the end is staring this entire crowd right in the face. You can come up with a bunch of different poignant phrases and colorful metaphors to describe the sheer heartbreak and withering this crowd is feeling. Dallas Braden and Jenny Kavnar have done a great job trying to encapsulate it. Hell, I hope I've done a good job encapsulating it. After a Nathaniel Lowe strikeout, some fans take it to themselves to try and extend the moment the best they can. Whether it be a streaker, another smoke bomb, but soon the powers that be show their might. Security is asked to line the stands around the vast foul territory, showing that nothing has changed. Their voices and concerns are just as meaningless today as they were yesterday, or on April 19, 2023, or in 2005 when Lou Wolf and John Fisher bought the team. Really, since 1995. This is a fan base that had their team dangled in front of them like a lure that could always be thrown into another pond. Travis Jankowski grounds out to end the game. And that's a wrap. It was perfect. Just like Zito's national anthem, it was everything it needed to be. What'd you think of it, John?
500 million, 501 million. Think of what?
The final game in the city of Oakland, as far as we know.
Oh yeah, it was alright, I guess. That shea butter guy looks okay. Can we wrap this up now? I have a meeting with United States Senator Josh Hawley at 2.
You know, you're a real fucking piece of work, Harpo. I know you think the only casualty in this situation is the city of Oakland, which in your mind is dispensable. Do something that you've never done in your life. Think about your team here. Resilient players and budding stars such as Lawrence Butler, Brent Rooker, Mason Miller, Jacob Wilson, and Shea Langoliers. Players who have earned their way to being the best of the best at what they do, a concept you are not familiar with, might I add, who are now going to have to waste away their primes playing in a minor league ballpark, assuming you don't trade them for scrap, but newsflash, there's a potential MLB PA grievance that's preventing you from doing that. These are players you couldn't even name when talking about the Athletics' temporary future in West Sacramento. Your sheer incompetence and inability to budge for a second when something doesn't immediately go your way has led to Major League Baseball players having to play their futures out in a minor league stadium. You don't care though, do you? You say you're a fan of the game, but tell me this, John. Would any true fan see the situation that they helped manufacture and deem it acceptable in any way?
No.
That's right. And you so desperately wanted to build something new. And I'll throw you a bone, John. This was never going to be the easiest situation. The Howard Terminal project was full of obstacles and was never going to be the easiest path going forward. So then, why the hell was it the hill that you and Dave Kaval chose to die on? And for you and Lou Wolf to continually scapegoat the fans and the city of Oakland after you bought the team. To create a fundamentally shitty product in a stadium that you neglected and a roster that you kept selling off. And when fans respond by not showing up to games and not buying into it and not buying the bullshit, to point to that as a reason that nobody in Oakland deserves a Major League Baseball team, it's like creating a dysfunctional car. One that doesn't have brakes or something. And when consumers catch on and don't buy the car because it sucks, pointing to that as a reason why nobody should have a car. You are a sniveling, silver spoon-eating Nepo baby, John. You weaponize your stubbornness, and you are not going to live up to any legacy other than one of abject failure. Just look at that crowd, John. This means something to them, even as our generations seem to grow further apart. Even as we let our differences define and divide us. This is the one thing any of us lucky enough to have been born into have to keep us together. It's something that livens up family dinners, just gets folks excited. And the fans of Oakland especially, who should be seen as the most passionate, not because they didn't show up, but because they did, despite everything that you and Dave Kaval and Lou Wolf and Steve Schott and Ken Hoffman have put them through. You know, this meant something to you once.
What do you mean?
There was another team on the West Coast, not too far from Oakland actually, who in the 90s were playing in a decrepit ballpark and had fallen on hard times financially because of it. A team who was moments away from being shipped off to a city of tourists and transplants. Your San Francisco Giants, John. You couldn't stand for seeing your favorite team, one who had built up such a rich history and tradition in the Bay Area, leave for Tampa, of all places. So you did what you always do. Asked for daddy's money and formed an ownership group to keep the Giants in San Francisco. So I just have to ask you, where was that love for the A's?